Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sell More Book Show, episode 549. I'm Bryan Cohen from Best Page Forward and Self Publishing Live, joined by Leslye Penelope, fantasy and romance author, a world building teacher extraordinaire. Leslye, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm great. You are a longtime listener of the show.
Yeah, I'm an OG.
I know. I remember your comments from like season 1,
Yeah,
basically, when Jim Kukril's walked the earth. That Jim Kukril still
absolutely.
walks the earth, of course.
Thank goodness.
But yeah, no, I mean, so much has changed. You've written a lot of books since then. You've taught a lot of people. You've taught at
Right.
conferences. You're speaking at conferences.
Yes.
These are very different from back in the olden days, 2015, 2014.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how does it feel to, like, years later you're writing books that readers are excited by, and you
hmm
get to teach these concepts to authors so that they can do the same? Like, how does it feel this deep into the author journey?
It's still great because I had so much help to get where I am now. Like 2025 will be my 10-year anniversary of publishing.
Awesome.
And, it's like I started out self-publishing. I'm hybrid now. And there are just so many writers who were so generous with their time, teaching, helping, mentoring. And to be able to give that back feels really good. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's such a good community coming up in romance and even the fantasy community that I'm a part of, just author friends. People are always really generous. And I just love being able to help new writers come up and share what I've learned. It's really satisfying in the same way that sharing my, words and my stories are satisfying as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Congrats on your 10-year publishing
Thank
anniversary.
you. Yeah,
That is
can't
so
believe it.
cool. I know. I know. Um, so folks should definitely go check out your resources, myimaginaryfriends.net/resources, which I love that URL so much. What are some of the things that people can get at that page?
So yeah, I'm also a website developer, so I'm fairly techie and I love tools. And so it's software that I've used to make things easier. I also have a section for templates and worksheets. I love all kinds of spreadsheets to help with my writing and plotting. So there's a collection of those there. And yeah, I have even more stuff available. So My Imaginary Friends is my podcast that I've had for 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a newsletter attached where there's even more library of resources. But yeah, I use a lot of stuff in my writing and plotting and organizing. And so I like to share some of those things too.
That's awesome. And I've checked out your YouTube channel with all those My Imaginary Friends episodes. Looks like you've got some amazing guests that you've had on there.
Yes.
I'm a podcaster, you're a podcaster. What do you feel like, if there's like an overarching lesson you've learned from doing these interviews? I know I've learned a billion lessons over almost 11 years of this. What would you say is like an overarching lesson that you've used in your own writing from talking to those people?
Yeah, it's really interesting to talk to writers and to see the differences and where things, diverge and overlap. I
Mm,
think that really one thing that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of other writers struggle with, is sort of just keeping your eyes on your own paper. It's
mm,
like there's someone has a thing that you think would be amazing. Oh, I would love to write that, or have that success in that area, or have that award or that list.
mm-hmm.
And that can get in our heads. And when that gets in our heads, I find for me, it makes the writing tougher. And so
Yeah.
talking to people who've had various levels of success and how they deal with even like having TV shows and movies made of their books, which is like an ideal for so many of us. But like down on the ground, like boots on the ground, what does it actually feel like? And then once that's done, what happens next? And so getting that perspective of you can have the best thing in the world happen to you. And then the next day, you're still at the writing desk, you've still got deadlines maybe, and it's not that much different than it was before. So keeping it all in perspective and just like running your own race and trying as much as you can not to have that comparisonitis, as Joanna Penn calls it, and that
Mm,
sort of writer jealousy that I think we all get. But we're all our own we're all doing our own thing, and kind of focus on your own thing and do that to the best of your ability, because that's all we can really control.
Yeah, no, that's such good advice. It's so easy to get the grass is greener on the other side
Yes.
syndrome, and uh they're doing Kentucky bluegrass and you've got some other grass. That was the extent of my grass knowledge.
Right. It's more
but
than I
but
have.
yeah, but everybody's got their own species of grass going on, and you
Yeah.
don't you if you get jealous of them and then you dive into something for 6 to 12 months, you get away from what makes
Yeah.
you who you are.
And if you had focused on your own thing for that 6 to 12 months, who knows where you could have been? You might have been happier and more fulfilled at the end of it also.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Awesome. Um, I got a webinar coming up called How to Build Your 2025 Self-Publishing Foundation. So if you are interested in the non-tactical ways, so not some fancy new thing, it's very in keeping with what we were just talking about. If you are interested in goals and habits and joy a little bit going into 2025, that's learn.bestpageforward.net/foundation 2025. Or there's a link. Links are easier. Go to the link in the show notes. Leslye, this is actually perfect for your episode, where you are such a great world building teacher. There was a question a couple weeks back. If you could set a story in your favorite place in the world, where would you set it and why? Lynn Remelgast said, let's see. Oh my goodness, there are definitely answers that weren't specifically related to this question. But Ann Bennett said, the women's fiction story is a love letter to the ocean and all things Bonaire Island. I was looking at the first two, and they said nothing about the question. The island's culture and surrounding sea life are as much a character in the story as the people. At the time, I thought it would be my only published work. I'm currently working on my 5th book. All of them take place on the island that I love. What would your answer be to that, Leslye? Where would you set a story if you were setting it in your favorite place?
I actually do set a lot of stories in San Francisco when I'm writing contemporary, which is one of my favorite places, at least in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and since I went to Greece earlier this year, then I think that I sort of made a fantasy world a little bit based on Santorini in my first book, Song of Blood and Stone. And so to finally get to see what the real Santorini looks like, I was like, oh, I did this very wrong in my like fantasy version. But I think that I would set another story in a place, maybe a fantasy world inspired by Greece again, because that was a lot of fun. And now having been there and having seen it and can do it actually better now that I've been there.
That's amazing. I love that idea. Awesome. Folks, remember you can answer the question of the week over at Sell More Book Show After Party Facebook group and the Sell More Book Show website. Top story of the week, though I will give 30 seconds to y'all don't put people on a blacklist.
Ooh, yeah.
Don't put people on a blacklist. If you are trying to get back at people who use AI, just like go right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen it hurt people, and I know that's the intention of the mob mentality, is I want to hurt the people that I think have wronged me, but nobody has wronged you.
Yeah. And I think history looks back at that unkindly. And it's hard to be on the right side of history putting someone on any kind of blacklist, I think.
Yes, I agree. That's the extent we're going to get into it. So, y'all, take 3 deep breaths and call me in the morning. Let's go into top story of the week. Oh, so beta. Once you have a passionate group of beta readers, what do you ask them? Asking, what did you think, is sure to elicit some kind of response, says Andrew Noakes, writing for JaneFriedman.com. But you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper to get what you need, end quote. Before you attach your book to an email and click send, consider structuring your questions with some strategy behind it. Structured feedback means asking a list of carefully chosen questions. Quote, start by trying to gain a broad understanding of what your beta readers liked and didn't like, says Noakes. What was your overall impression of the story? What did you like about it the most? Was there anything you didn't like about it? End quote. After the basics, narrow in on specifics important to you. Like how quickly they got sucked into the story. Did they ever start to lose interest? Was it easy to follow? Any inconsistencies or plot holes? Quote, one huge benefit of using beta readers is that you can establish patterns, says Noakes. If one beta reader doesn't connect to your main character, but all the others seem to find them engaging, you probably shouldn't rewrite your protagonist on the basis of that one opinion. Look for common threads, end quote. You can also include questions specific to your genre, like the world building in fantasy or the level of spice in your romance. And if there are areas of your book that you're specifically concerned about, ask. You know, I love this story, Leslye, because we always talk about, oh, you need beta readers, you need beta readers.
Right.
But there isn't always like but here's how you use beta
Exactly.
readers. What did you think of this article? What did you agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a great article. I think that learning to take feedback in general, especially when you're a newer writer, can be very difficult. You know, we're going to get hopefully feedback from editors, beta readers. You're going to get feedback from the readers once the book is on the shelf. So you might as well start trying to get used to it and trying to learn what you can from it. So structure, and since beta readers aren't professional editors, they're not going to come at you with, you know, structure and rules and things in the books that we read or the courses that we take. They're people, they're readers, they exemplify the reader experience. And so having questions for them, like not too many questions, but like a few to focus them, is how you make it like palatable for you and easy for you to understand and hopefully improve your writing based on their feedback.
Yeah, I mean, and I absolutely agree with you. And I love just this concept that if one person didn't like something, as long as you have a few beta readers so that, as the author said, you can establish a pattern, you know, okay, this person and this person didn't like it, but these 7 people had no issue with it, so
Yeah.
it might not be so bad.
Exactly. Like you can't listen to everything everyone says. And a lot of times beta readers will contradict each other, which can be super confusing and frustrating. So, you know, everything isn't for everyone. And maybe that beta reader just doesn't connect with your work. And that's fine. There's going to be people who have that experience. So yeah, focus on people who actually liked it, but have something constructive to say.
Yeah. No, great advice. Great advice. So, Leslye, hot potato of wisdom question for you. What beta reader mistakes have you made, and how have you changed your beta reading process as a result?
So my first book, when I was preparing to self-publish it, I wanted lots of feedback, and I was very nervous. I was like, I had never submitted anywhere. I was just going to self-publish, and so it was on me. And I got about 10 beta readers, and 10 was too many, at least for me. 10, I was swimming in the feedback and then the contradictions, and I didn't understand how to take it and who to listen to, and it just kind of spun me in circles for a while. So I did have some questions. I had read up on it, so I gave them a little questionnaire. I probably had too many questions. And yeah, that was definitely a problem. So these days, I limit the number of beta readers when I have time for actually having it, when I'm not on a crazy deadline. But I try to be very specific. I only ask a few questions because of the things that I'm concerned about and just like their overall impressions. I'd love them to give me, you know, did you like it? Did you not like it? Where did you get bored? Things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
the process has definitely changed.
Oh,
But
good.
yeah, if 10 was too much. How many beta readers do you think an author should have for each book, Bryan?
Well, I'm in when I've done fiction, and I haven't done fiction in a while. I always have to admit this, but when I've done fiction, I've liked having about 5. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like with 5, you know, you're gonna get 1 or 2 people that give you no feedback, and so
Yeah,
you need more than 2, just in case the 2 people are not feeling it that week.
right.
And so I think 4 or 5 is a nice number, but I think it also depends. Like if you are the kind of person that you know that you are like a skim over the top kind of person as a writer, and you need people to point out lots of little nitpicky things that maybe your editor didn't pick up on, maybe you end up erring on the side of more beta readers just to catch those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, too many cooks in the kitchen can
Right.
occur when you have uh, too many to pay attention to. And so definitely this is a process that, just like for you, Leslye, has and will have to evolve over time for you to find the number that you're happy with.
Exactly. Yeah, everyone's going to be different. So some people 10 might be great. Maybe you want to you want as many as possible, but yeah, if it's overwhelming, if it makes you want to stop writing, that's too much.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. Awesome. Well, we're going into the lightning round. This is funny. So usually I provide all the questions to our guest co-host, and I totally like bombed out of this one for some reason. So I don't know what questions for real this time Leslie's going to ask me,
It's
and
a
I'm
mystery.
excited. I know, very mysterious. But we need a lightningy, thundery sound here to start the lightning round. Leslie, here you go.
Pew pew pew.
Ooh, I really liked that. That sounded like one of those cool fireworks that like that sizzles a little bit.
Yeah.
I really like
Maybe
that.
more firework than lightning, but
No, it was
I
still
write
great.
fantasy.
It was still great. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to make it perfect for urban fantasy. Okay. So Leslye, researching a novel. This can be a time-consuming, somewhat of a disorganized process. Do you have any recommendations for tools or strategies authors can use to help them in this process?
Definitely. Yeah, I've been in the historical fantasy space, so doing a lot of historical research the past few years, and I needed some way to keep it organized. So I write in Scrivener. I also use Notion for a lot of businessy things and life organizational things. And so I've done it both ways, organizing all of my research into either Scrivener files or Notion documents, a Notion database, essentially, depending on how granular you want to be. But basically, when I read a book, watch a documentary, go and find a web resource or an article, I note it down. So I keep a little bibliography, and then the notes about that resource I keep as well. So when I do this in Scrivener, I can organize it by topic. So when I was doing my novel, The Monsters We Defy, which takes place in 1925, and, I wanted to research things like World War I and bootlegging and prohibition and Washington, D.C. in that time period, I would do categories for the different types of information and then organize each piece of research and all the notes I was taking into different, Scrivener files. And similarly in Notion, where I mostly do it these days, because I like being able to tag it with little keywords and look at all of like when I'm doing magic research, if I'm basing my magic system, like say I'm researching voodoo or something for a novel, I'll tag it all with that keyword. And so I love organization. I love databases. That's a kind of personality I have. But if something, everyone is not as highly detailed and organized as I am, which is totally fine. But finding a way to collect everything so that you can find it. I've also found it very useful when I go to copy edits, because my copy editors, can be very detailed and be like, did this really happen in 1925? Especially with my historical stuff. And I'll look it up and find my research and like, yes, I can prove that I did the research already and that actually did happen, even in fantasy. So it's helpful at multiple stages, just keeping everything together. And then when you want to double check months or years down the line, you have a place to go where everything is.
That's so cool. I haven't heard of people using Notion in that way, and I haven't even heard of that many people using Scrivener in the world building research. That's really cool. So great tips there, Leslie.
Thank you. All right. So, Bryan, have you ever used a story Bible when you were writing fiction? Or if not, how did you keep track of all of your story details or your world details?
When I first wrote my superhero series, I did fly by the seat of my pants a bit. I definitely think I would use a story Bible if I were going to do it differently. And I think if I was doing it now, I would hire that out lickety split, because I'm not as detail oriented. It's one of those, I can be if I have to,
Mm-hmm.
but if I don't feel like it, I won't. And so I will admit to a character's last name might have changed between book 3 and book 4. And so I got caught with that one. But I definitely think that if you're kind of a disorganized person like I am, get a buddy. Get someone who can help out, someone who is strong in that area. I think this is important for every author. As you grow your business, find people who can do the things that are not your cup of tea, that are not your strength. And so I would have absolutely hired out someone to do a story Bible or keep track of some basic character details so that I didn't mess anything up between books.
Yeah, hiring out is great too. I love doing story Bibles, but I have hired out as well for especially with an older series that I was coming back to when I was like, I'm going to reread this, but someone else can reread this and put all the stuff together for me in a nice package and make my life easier. So I love that idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Making life easier. Definitely recommended here. So, Leslye, when authors start a series, they're creating a whole new world of characters and settings. What do you think is the first step an author should take before they begin crafting a new story world?
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot in when I teach world building and in my world building course that I have. And because my philosophy of world building is very integrated, the idea of it is to get away from people who spend months or years building a world but haven't written their book yet, which is all too common, especially in the fantasy arena when I encounter writers. So it's like the world organically is integrated with the character and the plot. And so sometimes you have a character idea, your story, the inspiration is a character or a plot or a world. But before you get too far down the world building path, I think you should ask yourself, how is this world going to create conflicts for my character? How is the world going to be really deeply integrated as a place? It's like the only place where the story could happen is this world. So however your inspiration has come to you, if it's a character in a specific situation, or if it's a plot, I really want to write about this, this war that happens. Or you actually have this idea, I want a world that's based on, 1920s Japan or something. Like you figure out, okay, how are the characters and the plot going to really be tightly woven into this world, and everything about the world ideally would be reinforcing character and plot aspects. So that's why I like to braid it together and have everything kind of come about together.
That is really cool. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but it makes total sense. It reminds me of Jennifer Hilt, who's guested on this show, talking about tropes are a function of relationship. And so all sorts of tropes can be thought of as, well, how are these two different characters interacting? But
Mm-hmm.
thinking of using the world to reinforce theme, or the world to supplement conflict between
Mm-hmm.
characters or between groups of people in a fantasy world, it makes so much sense. I've never heard it described that way, and I'm so glad you're here to share some of that wisdom on the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Bryan, I tend to get stuck. I'm a plotter, but I get stuck around halfway
Mm,
through. And I
mm-hmm.
collect, like, I have a box of index cards on my desk that I have like little notes or craft things or tips to help me when I'm stuck. Do you have any strategies that you go back to again and again if you get stuck in writing or even business, just like inspirational things?
Well, um, I think of two things when stuck, and particularly when stuck in the middle of a story. So the first thing is, I think of getting out of the house, walking,
Hmm.
moving, getting the blood flowing. Because
Yeah.
when that blood is flowing, new ideas come. New
Right.
ideas come when you're relaxed, but they also come when you get the heart rate up. And so that's really key. I think about for the middle of a story, I think that people talk a lot about the mushy middle, but I've heard referred to as the middle of the story can be almost like a secondary massive climax that isn't going to be the big climax of the story, but can keep it from feeling mushy. I think back to the video game marketed in the States as Final Fantasy III. Spoiler alerts if it's 25, 35 years after that dang game came out. In the middle of the story, you think you are at this big conflict, this big thing, and literally the world ends. Like the world just ends in the middle of the game, and all of a sudden you're back with one character. You had like 10. And all of a sudden you're back with one character and you're on some island and you're basically starting over again because this massive crazy thing happened.
Wow.
And I thought that was one of the best storytelling choices I'd ever seen in a book. And I think that it opens up all sorts of creative possibilities of just like, hey, in the middle of a story, you can end the world. It's already been done. And so you can do anything you want to mess with things to make them more exciting for you. If you feel like you've written yourself in a hole, do something crazy, because, hey, it will serve to make it more interesting for you. And if it's more interesting for you, it's almost definitely going to be more interesting for the reader.
I love that. I think I'm going to write that down and put it in my box. Like, you can end the world in the middle of the story. That is
Yes.
great. Metaphorically, like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
And it
literally.
really happened in that game, which was
Yeah.
crazy. Awesome. Last question. Should authors start writing the first draft as soon as they finish the outline, or are there additional steps they can take for a more successful novel?
Yeah, this is interesting because I tend to, as soon as I get that outline done, I feel like I'm basically ready. So that's kind of how I go about it. The only thing I need is to sort of hear the first few lines. So I tend to write in order. I start at the beginning, and I can't start writing the first chapter until I get a sense of some opening lines. And I rarely actually change the opening. So it might take me a day or two between the outline and the writing to get that sense of it. Like, I'm thinking about it. Who am I starting with? Who's the POV character for the first chapter? But it's really close for me when I go through, because I spend a lot of time plotting. And so to get to the outline is its own trial and tribulation to have a completed outline that I can start drafting from. But yeah, I don't need a ton more at that point.
Do you feel like, you talk about how the outline is a challenge for you?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something you do with your outlines that you think some authors maybe do not?
Um, I do. So I kind of do two stages. I do like the bullet point outline, which is
Mm-hmm.
just literally the things that happen. And then I break it into paragraphs. So I try to have a paragraph for each scene that I'm going to write. And that just gives me, at the basics of like Sean Cohen's 5
Mm-hmm.
commandments of storytelling. So I want to kind of know what the desire is, what the conflict is, what the turn is, what the resolution of each scene is. And being able to do that at the outlining stage helps me. My first drafts are very different from my final drafts, but still it helps me kind of get into that feeling. So because I've prepared the outline a lot, and I believe in fast drafting, not editing for my first draft, uh, that's a process that has really helped me out. So I think that, building it out a little bit, it's still the scaffolding, it's still sort of just the bones of the house, but I try to put a little bit of meat on those bones.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you. Um, Leslye, we've come to the end of the lightning round. We need a question of the week. Obviously, we've talked about beta readers, we've talked about world building, we've talked about outlining. What's a question you would like to ask our listeners today?
I think I would ask them, do you find your stories starting, like, where does your story start? Do you start with a world? Do you start with a character, or do you start with a situation? And it can be very different for different books, but is there one that for maybe your last book, or one that you have noticed overall things come to you in a specific way?
I like that. So, where do your stories start? A world, a character, a situation? And I'm going to say, and why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, you can answer the question of the week over at the Sell More Book Show After Party Facebook group or sellmorebookshow.com. You can go check out Leslie's wonderful story resources at myimaginaryfriends.net/resources. Leslye, thank you for joining us today, and I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm such a fan of the show for such a long time, so I really appreciate the chance to be here.
I know, OG, early
Okay.
days. And you'll be back next week too, so we're really excited to have you twice. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome, folks. Well, you can go check out the upcoming webinar, How to Build Your 2025 Self-Publishing Foundation. Links in the show notes. And Leslye will be back next week for another episode. So, for Leslye, I'm Bryan. Have a great week of book selling, everybody. And we will be back here for episode 550. Woo! Bye, everybody.
Bye.